The dust-covered wagon rolled into Rawlins, Wyoming on a scorching afternoon in July of 1877, and Hannah Walsh knew with absolute certainty that she had reached the end of her strength, the end of her money, and possibly the end of her hope. She pulled the exhausted horses to a stop in front of the general store, her hands trembling on the reins as 5 pairs of eyes looked up at her from the wagon bed, waiting for her to tell them what happened next, waiting for her to be strong when she had nothing left to give. "Mama, I'm thirsty," said 4-year-old Samuel, his face streaked with dirt and tears. "I know, sweetheart. Just a moment." Hannah climbed down from the wagon seat, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. 3 months since Thomas had died from the fever that swept through their settlement in Nebraska. 3 months of trying to hold together a farm she could not manage alone, of watching her savings dwindle, of making the impossible decision to leave everything behind and head west in search of her late husband's brother, who supposedly had a ranch somewhere in Wyoming territory. But when she had finally reached the address, she found only an abandoned homestead and a neighbor who told her that Jacob Walsh had died 2 winters past. 10-year-old Margaret climbed down and helped her younger siblings from the wagon. At 8, Daniel was trying so hard to be the man of the family, his jaw set in determination even as exhaustion showed in every line of his small body. 6-year-old Elizabeth clutched her rag doll, and Samuel held tight to his sister's hand. Hannah's arms ached to hold them all, to promise them everything would be fine, but she had made too many promises she could not keep. "Stay close," she instructed, pulling her shawl tighter despite the heat. The town was small but bustling, with wooden buildings lining a wide dirt street. Cowboys and miners moved along the walkways, and the sound of a hammer striking metal rang from a blacksmith shop. She had perhaps $20 left to her name, enough for supplies but not enough for passage back east, not enough to start over, not enough for anything that mattered. The general store was blessedly cool inside, and a portly man with kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Afternoon, madam. What can I do for you?" Hannah's throat tightened. "I need to purchase some food, bread if you have it, some dried meat, water." "Of course." He began gathering items, glancing at the children who had filed in behind her. "You folks just arriving in town?" "Yes." She did not elaborate, could not bear to explain their situation to a stranger. When he tallied the cost, she counted out the coins carefully, watching her small reserve of money shrink even further. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over," the shopkeeper said gently. "Mrs. Patterson runs a clean establishment. Thank you." Hannah gathered the supplies and ushered the children back outside. She knew she could not afford a boarding house, not for long. She needed work, needed it desperately, but who would hire a woman with 5 children in tow? And what work could she do? She could cook and clean and sew, but those skills seemed painfully inadequate in a rough territory town where survival demanded harder edges. They ate sitting in the shade beside the wagon, and Hannah tried to formulate a plan. She would ask about work at the boarding house, perhaps. Someone might need a seamstress or a cook. Someone might take pity on a widow with children. The thought made her stomach churn with humiliation, but pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Mama, where are we going to sleep?" Elizabeth asked, her blue eyes wide with worry. "I'm working on that, darling." Hannah forced a smile she did not feel. A shadow fell across them, and she looked up to find a tall man standing nearby, his hat in his hands. He had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and his sun-weathered face held an expression of concern. A silver star was pinned to his vest, and Hannah's heart sank. Had she violated some ordinance by stopping here? Were they not allowed to camp in town? "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble. I do not mean to intrude, but I could not help noticing you and your children. My name is Lucas Zimmerman. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Hannah stood quickly, brushing dust from her worn dress. Hannah Walsh, these are my children. She listed their names, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. We are just passing through. Something in his dark eyes suggested he knew that for the lie it was. I happened to be in town picking up supplies when I overheard you at the store. I know this is forward of me, madam, and you have no reason to trust a stranger, but I have a proposition that might benefit us both. She waited, wary and desperate in equal measure. I have a large house on my ranch, too large for one person if I am being honest. I built it years ago with the intention of filling it with family, but that has not come to pass. The place could use a woman's touch. Meals are haphazard at best, and I have been doing my own washing and mending, which I am terrible at, frankly. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but pressing forward. I also have a ranch to run, and I could use help. Your boy there looks strong for his age. I could teach him about horses and cattle, pay him fair wages for whatever work he can manage. And if you would be willing to handle the household matters, cooking and such, I would provide room and board for all of you and a salary besides. Hannah stared at him, trying to process his words. You are offering us positions on your ranch. I am offering you a home, he said quietly. I know what it is to struggle, Mrs. Walsh. I know what it is to be alone. I have got room for 6 more hearts, if you will pardon the sentiment. The house is big and empty, and I would sleep better knowing it was filled with laughter instead of echoes. She wanted to weep. She wanted to throw her arms around this stranger and sob with relief. Instead, she studied him carefully, looking for any sign of ulterior motives, any hint of danger. But his eyes were steady and earnest, and something in her chest loosened slightly. That is an extraordinarily generous offer, Mr. Zimmerman. Lucas, please. And it is not entirely selfless. I truly could use the help, and I make a terrible pot of coffee. He smiled slightly, and Hannah found herself smiling back despite everything. Why? She asked simply. Why would you do this for strangers? He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dusty street. My parents came west when I was a boy. My father died the first winter, and my mother did not know how we would survive. A neighboring rancher took us in, gave us work and shelter. He said family was not always about blood, that sometimes it was about choosing to care for one another. He saved our lives. I have always wanted to pay that kindness forward, but the opportunity never arose until today. Hannah looked down at her children, at their hopeful faces, and then back at Lucas Zimmerman. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to question, to protect her children from potential harm. But she also recognized the hand of Providence when she saw it, and she was too tired and too desperate to turn away from what might be their only chance. We accept your offer, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. And we will work hard to earn our keep, I promise you that. Relief washed across his features. I have no doubt of that. Let me finish loading my wagon and then you can follow me out to the ranch. We should arrive before dark. As he walked away, Margaret tugged on Hannah's sleeve. Mama, is he going to be our new papa? No, sweetheart. He is going to be our employer. We are going to work for him in exchange for a place to live. He seems nice, Daniel said cautiously, ever the protective one. He does, Hannah agreed, but we will be watchful and careful just the same. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour, following a well-worn track that cut through rolling grassland. The children grew more animated as they traveled, pointing out jackrabbits and birds, their spirits lifting with the promise of a destination. Hannah tried to calm her racing thoughts, tried to make sense of how quickly their fortune had turned. That morning, she had woken in their cramped wagon with no prospects and dwindling hope. Now they were heading toward a home, however temporary it might prove to be. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, and Hannah caught her breath. The house was indeed large, a two-story structure of solid wood with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a barn, a stable, and several smaller structures she could not immediately identify. Fences stretched out across the grassland, enclosing pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. Lucas pulled his wagon to a stop near the house and climbed down, turning to help Hannah from her seat. His hand was warm and calloused, the grip firm but gentle. "Welcome to the Zimmerman Ranch. It is not fancy, but it is sturdy and sound." "It is beautiful," Hannah said honestly. "I had not expected something so substantial." "I have been working this land for 12 years, he said with evident pride. "Started with nothing but a claim and determination. Built everything you see with my own hands and the help of hired men when I could afford them." He gestured toward the house. "Let me show you inside." The interior was as impressive as the exterior, with a large main room that served as kitchen and dining area, a separate parlor, and a study. Upstairs were 5 bedrooms, more space than Hannah had seen in years. The furnishings were simple but well made, and everything was painfully clean in the way of a bachelor trying his best. "The children can each have their own room if they like, or share as they prefer," Lucas said. "The largest bedroom at the end of the hall is yours. It has a good view of the sunrise." Hannah walked into the room he indicated and found a spacious chamber with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a small writing desk near the window. The late afternoon light streamed through the glass, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. She turned to find Lucas standing in the doorway, his hat still in his hands. "This is too much," she said softly. "You hardly know us." "Then we will get to know each other," he replied. "I am a good judge of character, Mrs. Walsh. I see the way you care for your children, the strength it took to keep going when you had every reason to give up. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of person you are." Warmth flooded through her, a feeling she had almost forgotten. "Thank you, truly. I will not let you down." "I know you will not." He stepped back into the hallway. "Get yourselves settled. There is a pump out back for water. I will see to the horses and get your things from the wagon. Take your time, and when you are ready, you can explore the rest of the place." The children raced through the house with barely contained excitement, their voices echoing off the walls. Margaret and Elizabeth chose to share a room, delighting in the matching beds and the window that overlooked the barn. Daniel claimed a small room next to Hannah's, already imagining how he would arrange his few possessions. Samuel, the youngest, wanted to stay with his mother, and Hannah was grateful for the company. As the sun set and the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple, Hannah stood on the front porch and watched Lucas moving through the evening chores. He worked with efficient grace, checking on the horses in the corral, securing the barn, hauling water. There was something deeply appealing about his quiet competence, the way he moved through the world with purpose and confidence. She shook her head, pushing away such thoughts. She was a widow, freshly grieved and struggling. She had no business noticing the breadth of a man's shoulders or the kindness in his eyes. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. Lucas Zimmerman had offered them refuge out of Christian charity, and she would not complicate that by entertaining romantic notions. "Mrs. Walsh." His voice startled her from her reverie. "I was thinking, if you are not too tired, I could start a fire in the stove and you could see what we have to work with in terms of food supplies. Only if you are up to it, of course. Otherwise, I have some dried beef and biscuits that will suffice." "I would be happy to cook dinner," Hannah said, grateful for something useful to do. "Let me get the children settled and I will see what I can manage." The kitchen was well stocked with staples, and she found flour, eggs, preserved vegetables, and a surprisingly good selection of spices. As she worked, moving through the familiar rhythms of preparing a meal, Hannah felt something in her chest begin to ease. The children sat at the large wooden table, their chatter filling the space with life. Lucas brought in firewood and then excused himself to wash up, giving them privacy. When he returned, his hair was damp and he had changed into a clean shirt. Hannah had managed a respectable meal of fried eggs, biscuits, and stewed tomatoes, and the look of genuine pleasure on his face when he saw the table set with food made all her effort worthwhile. They ate together, the conversation tentative but warm. Lucas asked the children about their journey, about their interests and dreams. He listened with genuine attention, never dismissive or patronizing. Daniel asked questions about the ranch, about the horses and cattle, his eyes bright with interest. Margaret wanted to know if there were any other children nearby, and Lucas promised to introduce them to the neighboring families. After dinner, Hannah insisted on cleaning up while Lucas showed Daniel and Margaret the barn by lantern light. Elizabeth and Samuel were already drooping with exhaustion, and Hannah carried Samuel upstairs, tucking him into the bed with gentle care. Elizabeth followed, clutching her rag doll, and Hannah sat with them until their breathing deepened into sleep. She returned downstairs to find the kitchen empty and spotless. Lucas had finished the washing up, and the dishes were neatly stacked to dry. The sight brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thomas had been a good man, but he had never thought to help with household chores, never understood how much the small gestures mattered. She wiped at her eyes quickly, composing herself before Lucas could return and see her crying. But he did return, stepping into the kitchen quietly. If he noticed her tears, he said nothing. "The older children are getting ready for bed. I think the excitement of the day finally caught up with them." He paused. "Mrs. Walsh, I want you to know that you and the children are safe here. I am not going to take advantage of your situation or expect anything beyond what we discussed. You have my word on that." "I believe you," Hannah said, and realized she meant it. "You are a good man, Lucas Zimmerman." "I try to be." He smiled, the expression softening his features. "Get some rest. Tomorrow I will show you around properly, introduce you to the routine. There is no rush to start working right away. Take the time you need to settle in." "Thank you," she hesitated, "for everything. I do not know what we would have done if you had not appeared today." "You would have figured something out," he said with quiet certainty. "Women like you always do." That night, Hannah lay in the comfortable bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of wood settling, the whisper of wind through grass. Samuel breathed softly beside her, his small body warm and trusting. For the first time in 3 months, Hannah allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. They had been given a second chance, and she would do everything in her power to make the most of it. The days that followed fell into a natural rhythm. Hannah rose early to prepare breakfast, finding satisfaction in cooking for more than just her children. Lucas was an appreciative audience, always expressing genuine gratitude for whatever she served. The children adapted quickly to ranch life, with Daniel shadowing Lucas whenever possible, soaking up knowledge about horses and cattle with the intensity of a boy desperate to learn. Margaret helped with household tasks, revealing herself to be responsible and hardworking beyond her years. Even young Elizabeth and Samuel found their places, collecting eggs from the henhouse and playing in the yard under Hannah's watchful eye. Lucas was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging with Daniel, showing him how to properly saddle a horse, how to read the signs of illness in cattle, how to mend a fence. Hannah watched their interactions with a mixture of gratitude and sadness, knowing that Thomas would have loved to teach their son these things, that Daniel was growing up without a father's guidance. But Lucas filled that role with such natural grace that it was impossible to resent him for it. The ranch kept Lucas busy from dawn to dusk, and he employed 2 hired hands who lived in a bunkhouse beyond the barn. They were rough men, weathered by hard work and harder living, but they treated Hannah with respect and were unfailingly kind to the children. She learned that Lucas was known throughout the territory as a fair employer and an honest dealer, that his reputation was solid as the mountains that ringed the horizon. As the weeks passed, Hannah found herself settling into their new life with surprising ease. She took pride in maintaining the house, in creating meals that brought genuine pleasure to the table, in mending Lucas's worn shirts and noticing the surprise on his face when he found them repaired in his wardrobe. The children thrived in the open air and relative security of the ranch, their laughter becoming a constant backdrop to the daily work. But there was something else growing too, something Hannah tried desperately to ignore. She found herself watching Lucas as he worked, admiring the strength in his frame, the gentleness in his hands when he helped Samuel onto a horse. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the deep warmth of his laugh. She looked forward to their conversations at the end of the day when the children were in bed, and they would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing while the stars wheeled overhead. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more. He had saved them, given them security when they had none. Of course she felt warmth toward him. It did not mean anything deeper. She was still mourning Thomas, still learning to live as a widow. It was too soon to feel anything for another man, too complicated given their living arrangement and employment situation. But her heart did not seem to care about logic or propriety. Her heart noticed the way Lucas looked at her sometimes, with an expression she was afraid to name. Her heart beat faster when their hands accidentally touched, when he stood close enough that she could smell leather and soap, and something uniquely him. Her heart whispered dangerous things, things about second chances and unexpected happiness, things she could not afford to believe. It was late August when things shifted between them, when the careful distance they had maintained began to crack. Lucas had been working on expanding one of the corrals, and he had asked Daniel to help him. Hannah watched from the kitchen window as her son worked alongside the man who had become so important to their lives, saw the pride on Daniel's face when Lucas clapped him on the shoulder for a job well done. That evening, after dinner, Lucas asked Hannah to walk with him. They left the children in Margaret's capable care and strolled across the grassland as twilight deepened around them. For a long time, neither spoke, simply walking in comfortable silence. Finally, Lucas stopped and turned to face her. "Hannah, I need to be honest with you about something." Her heart stuttered. "All right. When I offered you and your children a place here, I meant it as a simple business arrangement. I needed help with the house. You needed shelter and work. It seemed like a practical solution that would benefit everyone involved." "Yes," she said carefully, uncertain where this was leading. "But it has become more than that for me." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the words. "I find myself thinking about you constantly, wondering what you think about things, looking forward to our conversations. Noticing the small things you do that make this house feel like a home. I care for you, Hannah, more than an employer should care for his employee, and I needed you to know that, even though I have no right to say it." Hannah's breath caught. "Lucas." "I know it is too soon," he continued quickly. "I know you are still grieving your husband, and I do not mean to add pressure or make things awkward between us. But I am not good at pretending, and I did not want to continue without being honest about how I feel. He met her eyes in the gathering darkness. I am falling in love with you, with all of you. Your children feel like the family I always wanted, and you have become essential to me in ways I did not anticipate. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, emotion overwhelming her. I have been so afraid to admit even to myself how I feel. Thomas has been gone for only a few months, and I thought it was too soon, that I was being disloyal to his memory. But you are right. This has become more than a business arrangement. And how do you feel? His voice was gentle, giving her space to answer honestly. I feel alive again, she whispered. For the first time since Thomas died, I feel like I have a future worth living instead of just surviving. When I am with you, I feel seen and valued. You are kind to my children, patient with their questions, generous with your time. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe. And yes, I care for you too. More than I should, more than I thought I was capable of feeling again. Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. Then we will take this slowly. There is no rush. We have time to figure out what this is between us, time to let your heart heal, time to be certain. I am not going anywhere, Hannah. Neither are you and your children. We can let this grow naturally, see where it leads. She covered his hands with hers, holding onto the warmth and strength she found there. What if people talk? A widow living in your house. Let them talk, he said simply. Anyone who knows me knows my character. And anyone who knows you will see that you are a lady of impeccable reputation doing honest work to support her family. But if it troubles you, we could speak to the pastor in town, make sure everything is proper and above board. Perhaps that would be wise. She smiled through her tears. I never expected this. When I rolled into Rawlins that day, I thought we had reached the end of everything. I did not know we were actually at a beginning. The best beginnings often come disguised as endings, Lucas said. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to refuse, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and sweet, a promise rather than a demand, and Hannah felt something in her chest open up and bloom. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and though they did not tell the children anything that night, Margaret gave Hannah a knowing look that suggested she had already figured out that something was changing between the adults. The next weeks were a dance of discovery, of learning each other through small moments and shared experiences. Lucas taught Hannah to ride, his hands steady on her waist as he helped her into the saddle, his voice patient as he explained how to guide the horse. They rode out across the ranch together, exploring the boundaries of his land, and she marveled at the vast beauty of the Wyoming territory. Hannah began to notice the small ways Lucas showed his affection. He brought her wildflowers he found while checking the fence lines. He carved wooden animals for Samuel and Elizabeth, working on them by lamplight after a long day. He listened to Margaret talk about books and promised to order new ones from a catalog. He treated Daniel like a son, taking time to explain things carefully, praising his progress and teaching him skills that would serve him well in life. They visited the church in Rawlins on Sundays, presenting themselves as a respectable household. The pastor, an elderly man named Reverend Michaels, invited them to his home for tea and listened to their story with kind attention. He assured Hannah that her arrangement was perfectly proper given the circumstances, but suggested that if deeper feelings developed, they should consider making the relationship official in time. Love is a gift from God, he said, his rheumy eyes twinkling. When it comes along, we should not turn away from it out of fear or excessive propriety, but neither should we rush into decisions of lasting consequence. You both seem like sensible people. Trust your hearts, but use your heads as well. As autumn painted the grasslands in gold and amber, Hannah felt herself falling deeper in love with Lucas Zimmerman. It was different from what she had felt for Thomas, less the passionate romance of youth and more the steady, deep affection of two people who had weathered storms and knew the value of kindness. She loved the way Lucas sat with Samuel at bedtime, telling stories of his own childhood. She loved how he taught Daniel to whittle, the two of them sitting on the porch steps with knives and wood, sharing comfortable silence. She loved his integrity, the way he treated everyone from wealthy ranchers to traveling peddlers with the same honest respect. And she could see that he loved her in return, not just in words but in actions. The way he woke before dawn to stoke the fire so the kitchen would be warm when she came down. The way he complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation. The way he asked her opinion on ranch matters, valuing her perspective. The way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, his expression full of wonder and tenderness. One evening in October, after the children had gone to bed, Lucas asked Hannah to meet him in the parlor. She found him standing by the fireplace, unusually nervous, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Is everything all right?" she asked, concerned. "Everything is fine. Better than fine, actually." He pulled his hands from his pockets and she saw that he was holding something. "Hannah, when I built this house 12 years ago, I imagined filling it with family, with love and laughter and all the things that make a house a home. But as the years passed and that did not happen, I began to think maybe it was not meant for me. Maybe I was supposed to live my life alone, and I tried to make peace with that." He moved closer, taking her hand. "Then you came into my life like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. You and your beautiful children, all of you needing help, all of you giving me exactly what I had been missing. These past months have been the happiest of my life, Hannah. Not because of what you do for me, though I appreciate all of it, but because of who you are. Your strength, your grace, your kindness, your laugh. I love everything about you." Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I know it has not been a year since your husband passed, and if you need more time, I will wait. I would wait forever for you. But I have to ask, because I cannot hold it in any longer." He knelt down on one knee, opening his hand to reveal a simple gold band. "Hannah Walsh, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you let me be a father to your children and a husband to you? Will you fill this house with love and make my life complete?" Tears streamed down Hannah's face as she dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes, yes, Lucas, I will marry you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. You have given us everything, not just a home but a future, not just security but joy. I want to spend my life with you. I want to build a family with you. I want to grow old beside you on this ranch, watching our children grow and thrive." He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands and then pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart racing, matching the rhythm of her own. When he finally pulled back and kissed her, it was gentle and deep and full of promise. It felt like coming home. It felt like beginning again. They told the children the next morning over breakfast, and the reaction was everything Hannah could have hoped for. Daniel grinned so wide his face nearly split, immediately calling Lucas Pa, as if he had been waiting for permission. Margaret hugged them both, crying happy tears. Elizabeth and Samuel danced around the kitchen in celebration, not entirely understanding but catching the joy of the moment. "Does this mean we get to stay forever?" Samuel asked, climbing into Lucas's lap. "Forever and always," Lucas promised, ruffling the boy's hair. "You are my family now, all of you." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Rawlins, with the children standing up as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Hannah wore a new dress of deep blue that Lucas had insisted on buying for her, and he wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and so full of love that she could barely breathe for the joy of it. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife, and Lucas kissed her in front of God and everyone, Hannah felt like her heart might burst. The ranch became officially theirs together, a partnership in every sense. Lucas had the legal papers drawn up to ensure Hannah was a co-owner, insisting that everything he had was now hers as well. She protested that it was too much, but he was adamant. "We are building this life together," he said firmly. "You are not just my wife, Hannah. You are my partner. What is mine is yours, and what is ours will belong to our children." That first winter as a married couple was harsh, with snow piling up past the windows and temperatures dropping so low that the water in the basin froze overnight. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and laughter and love. Lucas taught the children to play checkers and card games during the long evenings. Hannah read aloud from books while everyone gathered around the fireplace. They sang songs and told stories and created traditions that would last a lifetime. Lucas was a wonderful husband, attentive and affectionate, patient with Hannah as she learned to trust again, to open her heart fully after loss. He was also a devoted father to the children, treating them as his own without reservation. He helped Daniel with his reading, sat through Elizabeth's endless questions about animals, played imaginative games with Samuel, and had long, thoughtful conversations with Margaret about her dreams for the future. In late winter, Hannah realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mixture of emotions. Joy, certainly, at the thought of bringing a child into the world with Lucas. But also fear, remembering the difficulty of her last pregnancy with Samuel. And grief, knowing that this child would never know Thomas, would have no connection to her first husband. When she told Lucas, he swept her into his arms with such exuberant happiness that her fears momentarily quieted. "A baby," he breathed, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear it. Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "Hannah, you have already given me so much. A wife, a family, a purpose beyond just working the land, and now a child of our own blood. I feel like the most blessed man alive." The children were thrilled at the news, each reacting in their own way. Daniel puffed up with importance at the thought of being a big brother to another sibling. Margaret immediately began planning how to help with the baby. Elizabeth wanted to know if it would be a girl or boy, and Samuel was just excited about the idea of someone smaller than him in the house. Lucas became even more protective of Hannah, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy. Let him handle tasks she normally managed with ease. It was endearing and slightly frustrating, but Hannah appreciated the love behind his concern. She had carried and birthed 5 children largely alone, with Thomas often away for work. Having a husband who was present and involved was a gift she had not anticipated. Spring came with an explosion of green across the ranch, and Hannah's belly swelled with new life. Lucas would rest his hand on her stomach in the evenings, talking to the baby, telling their unborn child about the family waiting to meet them, about the ranch they would grow up on, about how loved they already were. "Boy or girl, it does not matter," he said one night as they lay in bed. "As long as you are both healthy, I will be content." "I think it is a boy," Hannah said, running her hand over her belly. "He kicks like a mule," Lucas laughed. "Just like his brothers and sisters then. This child is going to fit right in." The baby arrived in early September of 1878, a full year after Hannah had rolled into Rawlins with nothing but desperation and hope. The birth was hard, as births often were, But Hannah was strong, and Lucas held her hand through every moment, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave her side despite the midwife's suggestion that he wait elsewhere. When their son finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Lucas cut the cord with shaking hands and then openly wept as he held the tiny bundle. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "Hannah, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Hannah's first husband, because Lucas insisted it was right to honor the man who had fathered the children he now called his own. Hannah loved him even more for that generosity of spirit, for understanding that honoring the past did not diminish their present. Little Thomas became the darling of the household, passed from sibling to sibling, cuddled and cooed over and thoroughly adored. Lucas was a natural father to an infant, getting up for midnight feedings, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Hannah watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm, marked now by the milestones of their growing family. Daniel became an accomplished horseman and took on more responsibilities around the ranch. Margaret developed a gift for gardening and began cultivating vegetables and herbs that supplemented their meals beautifully. Elizabeth showed a talent for sewing, learning from Hannah and creating increasingly complex projects. Samuel followed Lucas everywhere, a constant shadow full of questions and enthusiasm. 2 years later, Hannah gave birth to another child, a daughter they named Lily Rose. Lucas cradled his second biological child with the same wonder he had shown with Thomas. But he also made sure to remind the older children that they were equally his, that blood did not determine love. "I've got room in my heart for all of you," he told them, gathering the whole family into his arms. "You are all my children, every single one of you." The ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming known throughout Wyoming territory as one of the finest operations around. Lucas expanded the herd and began breeding horses as well as cattle, with Daniel showing a particular aptitude for working with the horses. Hannah managed the household accounts with careful attention, ensuring they saved money and made wise investments. Together they built something lasting and important, a legacy for their children. Over the years, life brought its share of challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and predators that threatened the livestock. There were close calls and dangerous moments, times when Lucas came home injured from a fall or a kick, times when the children scared them with childhood illnesses. But they weathered every storm together, drawing strength from their love and commitment to one another. Margaret grew into a beautiful young woman and eventually married a schoolteacher who moved to Rawlins, staying close to the family. Daniel took over more of the ranch operations as Lucas grew older, proving himself a capable and innovative rancher. Elizabeth married a doctor and moved to Cheyenne, though she visited often. Samuel followed his father's footsteps into ranching, eventually claiming a piece of land adjacent to the family property. Through it all, Hannah and Lucas remained devoted to each other, their love deepening with each passing year. They grew old together on the ranch, watching their family expand with grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. The house that had once echoed with loneliness stayed, filled with laughter and love, exactly as Lucas had dreamed when he built it all those years ago. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Hannah's hair was silver now, and Lucas moved with the stiffness of a man who had worked hard all his life, but they still held hands like newlyweds. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked softly, "taking in a desperate widow with 5 children?" Lucas turned to look at her, his dark eyes still bright with love despite the crow's feet that crinkled around them. Regret the best decision I ever made. Hannah, you and those children saved my life just as much as I saved yours. More, probably. You gave me purpose and joy and a family beyond anything I ever imagined. If I could go back to that day in Rawlins, I would not change a single thing. I love you, she said simply. More now than even that first year, which I did not think was possible. Love grows, he replied, squeezing her hand. That is the beauty of it. Every shared experience, every challenge overcome, every moment of joy, it all adds to what we feel. We have built something beautiful together, Hannah. Not just this ranch, but this family, this life. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch they had built together. In the house behind them, they could hear their youngest grandchildren playing, watched over by Thomas and Lily Rose, who had both chosen to stay close to home. The legacy they had created stretched out before them and behind them, a testament to the power of choosing love even when circumstances seemed impossible. Hannah thought back to that dusty afternoon when she had arrived in Rawlins with nothing but 5 frightened children and a prayer for help. She thought about the tall cowboy who had approached them with an offer that seemed too good to be true. She thought about how close she had come to refusing out of pride or fear, how different all their lives would have been if she had made that choice. But she had not refused. She had taken a chance on a stranger's kindness, had allowed herself to hope when hope seemed foolish. And in return, she had received more than she ever dreamed possible. A devoted husband, a secure home, a thriving family, and a love story that would be told for generations. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "That you had room for 6 more hearts," Hannah said, smiling at him in the twilight. "And somehow those hearts ended up filling the whole ranch." "Best capacity problem I ever had," Lucas replied with a grin. Then he stood, pulling her gently to her feet, and led her into a slow dance right there on the porch, humming a tune they had danced to at their wedding. Hannah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and the ranch remained a place of love and industry. Hannah and Lucas's story became something of a legend in Rawlins, told as an example of how Providence could work in mysterious ways, how kindness could change lives, how love could bloom even in the hardest soil. When Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, with Hannah holding his hand and his children gathered around his bed, the whole territory mourned the loss of a good man. But his legacy lived on in every person he had touched, every child he had raised, every kindness he had shown. Hannah grieved deeply, but she also celebrated a life well lived and a love that had sustained her through decades of joy and challenge. She lived another 8 years after his death, watching her grandchildren grow, sharing stories of the cowboy who had said he had room for 6 more hearts, and had meant it with every fiber of his being. When her own time came, surrounded by family in the house Lucas had built, Hannah's last words were about him, about how she would see him again soon, about how their love had been the greatest blessing of her life. They buried her beside Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to stretch into eternity. And if love could transcend death, then surely theirs did, woven into the very fabric of the land they had cultivated together, living on in the descendants who continued to work the soil and care for the animals, and keep alive the story of how a desperate widow and a kind cowboy created something beautiful from nothing but hope and determination, and room in their hearts for love. The ranch remained in the family for generations. each new custodian adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation laid by Hannah and Lucas. The original house stood strong, maintained with care, a monument to what was possible when people chose compassion over indifference, when they opened their hearts to strangers, when they believed in second chances and the redemptive power of love. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the grass and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, those who lived there swore they could feel the presence of the couple who started it all, still watching over the land they had loved, still holding hands as they had through all the years of their remarkable life together. The story of Hannah Walsh and Lucas Zimmerman became more than just family history. It became a reminder that the most profound transformations often begin with a simple act of kindness, that families are built not just through blood but through choice and commitment, that love can find us even when we are not looking for it, and that sometimes the ending of one chapter is merely the beginning of something far more beautiful than we could have imagined. Their great-great-grandchildren still gathered at the ranch for holidays, filling the rooms with multiple generations of love and laughter. They told the story to their own children, keeping alive the memory of how it all began. With a wagon rolling into town, 5 scared children, 1 determined widow, and a cowboy who looked at them and saw not a burden but a blessing, not an obligation but an opportunity to create exactly the family he had always wanted. The legacy was not just in the land or the house or even the bloodline. It was in the values they had lived by, the kindness they had shown, the love they had cultivated. It was in the way each generation learned that family was about showing up, about choosing to care, about making room in your heart even when it seemed full, because love had a way of expanding to fill whatever space you gave it. And so the story lived on, told and retold, a testament to everything good that could happen when someone said yes to an unexpected offer, when someone took a chance on strangers, when someone believed that they had room for 6 more hearts and discovered that those hearts had room for them right back.